the key to success as far as my business development was that I knew what I was talking about operationally, that I could have that conversation with an owner and anticipate a legal issue or anticipate a financing issue or whatever it might have been, because I've had the perspective of being a lawyer, being a borrower, being a lender, being a landlord, being a tenant, doing all the different things along the way and bringing that, 360-degree matter of fact, like, hey, if you read that lease, you will find this.
Today we have David Kirshenbaum joining us. David, a seasoned executive with over 30 years of experience in guiding growth-oriented businesses, business development, and operations asset management, is here to share his remarkable career journey and his role as a connector in the business world. In this conversation, Mark and David delve deep into David's definition of heroes and the influential figures who have shaped his professional life. David shares valuable lessons he has learned from his mentors and how their guidance has influenced his approach to business. Their insights provide a glimpse into the power of mentorship and the profound impact it can have on one's career. As the self-proclaimed connector-in-chief, David's vast network and resourcefulness have played a significant role in his success. He emphasizes the importance of building a functional network and explains how he leverages it to create valuable connections for himself and his clients. Whether it's introductions to potential investors or strategic partnerships, David's network is a powerful asset that he utilizes to drive growth and opportunity. But it doesn't stop there. Comedy and storytelling also take center stage in this conversation. David shares how he incorporates humor into his professional life, using it as a tool to build rapport, ease conversations, and connect with people on a deeper level. His insights highlight the power of storytelling and the impact it can have in establishing meaningful connections. Join us on this enlightening episode of the Hero of the Hour podcast as we delve into David Kirshenbaum's remarkable journey, his expertise in connecting businesses, and his unique approach to success.
Welcome, everybody. It's Mark Murphy, founder and CEO of Northeast Private Client Group and author of my third book, The Ultimate Investment, which is #1 on Amazon. And welcome to the Hero of the Hour podcast, David Kirshenbaum. So happy to have you here today.
I am happy to be here, and I'm grateful for the opportunity, and I'm thrilled. I meet a lot of people, and you are one gem of a person who I'm so grateful I've met.
Well, I'll let my mother know that, so I'll tell her there's two of you and her that believe that. But having said that, I always like to start the podcast by talking about, I only bring people here, David, who are heroes to me and or personal heroes or heroes to other people. Who are some of your heroes, or how do you describe a hero?
Well, I don't know. I don't think necessarily as much of heroes. I mean, obviously, as a kid growing up, I had sports heroes. I grew up in your neck of the woods, and one of my heroes was Thurman Munson. And I just loved the way he played baseball. He had an unfortunate ending. And there were these sports folks along a long time. But I would say that just as I've matured, I was lucky enough to marry into a phenomenal family, and my father-in-law was definitely one of my heroes. He was someone who literally started in the shipping department or the boxing department or something of this company in Aurora, Illinois, worked his way up to ultimately be the president of that company, and then leapfrogged over everyone else in the company because they were bought by a larger conglomerate, and he jumped to be the CEO of the conglomerate. And he taught me a lot of phenomenal business lessons along the way. And then I've been able to, over time, develop a series of mentors that have been really helpful to me. I'd call it a personal board of directors. So I have a web of people that I go to for advice, for just consideration, and I think it's really important to have. And I think you're quickly becoming a person that may fit in that Mount Rushmore-like category of folks that I would go to for certain assistance.
I podcast only keeps people's attention for so long. So I was going to read your resume, but it would take 45 minutes to read your resume. But just a few highlights. Besides your undergraduate degree at Emory, you've got your JD and your MBA at Northwestern. You've been adjunct professor at Northwestern. Started your career as a real estate attorney, but you've been the CEO of a number of ventures, and now an executive coach to some of the wealthiest people in America. I'd love to start first by talking about, a lot of people have heard of Tiger 21, but most people and a lot of people watching this have not. And I think the Tiger 21 could be one of the most exciting things I've seen in the entrepreneurial space to create a mastermind of some really incredible people. How'd you get involved in Tiger 21, and what is Tiger 21?
Um, so I got involved about 3 years ago. So Tiger 21 is about a 23, 24-year-old organization founded out of New York and founded by a guy named Michael Sonnenfeld, who had a series of very successful exits from real estate developments and businesses and such. And I believe he might have been a YPO member, but if you're familiar with either YPO or Vistage, Tiger is a version of that peer-to-peer learning organization, but the focus is more or less on successful entrepreneurs who have either sold businesses or about to sold businesses and have accumulated a significant amount of wealth, and find that it's easier to discuss topics around wealth and business with folks who have walked in those shoes before. So in effect, it creates, so Tiger 21 is an international organization. There's about 100 groups worldwide, mostly in the United States. We meet in groups of 15. I manage 2 groups. The title I have is chair. And we meet on a monthly basis to talk about issues of common concern, many of which have to do with wealth, family office formation, things like how do you talk to your kids about money, tax efficiency. So a lot of the things that you cover on a one-on-one basis in your practice, because I know you have an extremely successful practice and you manage billions of dollars on behalf of a number of successful entrepreneurs. And most of the entrepreneurs I deal with in Tiger 21 have someone like you that they deal with on a regular basis, but they may not want to bring up with you certain topics which can be discussed under the cone of silence and the confidentiality that a Tiger 21 group affords. And so part of it, and I know we're going to talk a little bit about networks, but a friend of mine who manages 3 Tiger groups, 2 in Chicago and 1 in a family office setting, was asked to find someone who had the Rolodex, had the skills, et cetera, to potentially manage 1 Tiger group. And I got involved then and has since added a 2nd Tiger group to my portfolio.
By the way, everybody who I've met who knows you, you're known by the following phrase: David Kirshenbaum is the connector in chief. I can't think of a cooler title. I think that's cooler than all the CEO titles you've had and all the other Grand Poobah, everything else. The connector in chief to me is the shit. So I'd love to talk about how the connector in chief, what the connector in chief, and why you're known as the connector in chief.
Well, it's been an interesting 40 years in business, something along those lines. And one of the jokes I use is that I've pivoted more times than like LeBron James, just because things happen along the way that you don't have an expectation. And my career has been extremely nonlinear. And I have spent years and years and years just creating a large network in a number of different functional areas, some obviously personal. But I've had occasion to be involved with real estate, with law, with venture capital, with private equity, with private lending, with a number of different industries: cannabis, healthy food, real estate, technology. And I've just been really, really assiduous in my desire to just kind of build not only a large network, but just a functional network, a network of resources that I can offer not only to myself and my own business, but also to my clients, my friends, et cetera. And just this morning, as an example, I was speaking with someone who's a prospective client for my business, and she is a healthy food entrepreneur, early stage, young, and is producing her product out of Africa. And it just so happens that I have one mentor and one contact in the VC world who might be able to help her in her endeavors. And for a long period of time, I would just say, oh, let me introduce you to X and Y. And I think, like you, because you've made some really kind introductions for me, both with regard to Tiger 21 and just for Meadeco as well. I don't do it willy-nilly. I do it purposefully and with the hope that both parties will benefit from an introduction. So, I've literally made a career out of it. And then, kind of as I've gotten further and further into my career, I realized that that my as I think this comes out of Seinfeld, where my network, it's gold, Jerry, it's gold, and my network is gold. And I jokingly, and we've talked about this, I jokingly say that I lead a slumdog millionaire lifestyle, where the one person I need to know is the one person I actually know, and I put them together. And I've been able to, come up with some crazy results by just having cultivated a network and then taken care of it over time.
I mean, and if you're when you're Jewish, they refer to you as a rabbi. If you were Italian, that you'd be a consigliere. You'd be. I mean, but I would, as I've gotten to know you, that's what I would say. If there's one guy you need to know, it's you. And I think that's. I can see why that you've been so tremendously successful. Being able to do that, because that service is invaluable and that thought process is invaluable, particularly to entrepreneurs who oftentimes are so in the weeds of their own business that they've not had the time to go do the things that you've been able to do. So what a powerful combination that is. The other thing that I don't know if it's going to come off in this podcast or not, probably because I'm not a good enough straight man for you, but I will tell you that you're one of the few. There's a lot of funny people out there, but I actually think you're one of the few people that could actually have made a living as a comedian if you put as much time into comedy as you do into your businesses. Tell me, how does comedy play a role in your life? How does it play a role in your business?
Well, I am the king of dad jokes. Just ask my three children, who are quite sick of my jokes. It's just, I've used comedy and storytelling to good effect over time. I think, using comedy, and I'm no Jerry Seinfeld. I'm just, like when you were giving my my quick bio before, I've got a bunch of stock jokes that I've used over and over again, but because I meet so many different people, I can tell them over and over again. And, so like, as an example, when you said about my educational background, I jokingly say that I have more degrees than a thermometer. And, that is an old joke that I recycled out of a 1950s movie, but I remember it. It's funny, and it's applicable because I have way too much education for my own good, having finished 22 grades. So, and then just storytelling. And I think, you've also done this. I don't know if you want to call it hero stories. I know in connection with some of my interviewing for positions over time, I've hired a lot of people, but I've also had occasion to apply for a number of jobs, senior level jobs at a number of different companies over time. And one of the things I was able to develop alongside of my resume was something called hero stories, which is just, a little fact pattern that I was able to use effectively in the context of an interview. So I'm not really answering your question, and I'm not really being terribly funny as relates to just, the comedy. But if I am able to see that there's a way to loosen up the conversation and just get people more comfortable from a personality, because I think it's really important that people are real when they're conversing with folks. And part of what I'm doing is being a little cynical and, a little, just comedic when appropriate. And it's worked to great effect.
Well, I've seen you use it as not only a weapon, but I've seen it's also you're also a great listener. So you react to people, and your responses are just spot on. That is apropos at every time. I find myself trying to do a little of that, and You just in this politically correct world, you hope something that was funny 3 years ago may be verboten right now. You know,
Yeah, and that's and one of the things we've talked about is, I've taught a class on networking and business development, both at law schools, colleges, business schools, at law firms, accounting firms, and the like. And one of the cardinal rules in there is don't talk about politics, because you just don't know who you're going to offend, and you have a 50-50 chance of offending someone. And I've learned that lesson the hard way by assuming that someone was, one political camp, and it turns out that they were, exactly the opposite, and that leads to loss of business, embarrassment, and a little bit of humiliation while you're at it. So I'm very careful in terms of the political angle, especially in today's highly partisan times.
I've actually tried to serve my state and serve my country politically by being part of transition teams of governors and other things like that. And I've actually lost business as a result of that, where people thought I was associated with the governor or the candidate, when I was just doing a public service trying to make the state a better place to be in. And it's amazing how electrically charged this is. And I mean, it is clearly the third rail at this point. Before I move on from Tiger 21, I just want to let anybody know that's watching this that my intention is to become a Tiger 21 member myself. And I think for anybody in the ultra high net worth space, I think it's something that you should at least explore. In that I think that I don't think there's a better place for a think tank than Tiger 21, and seeing some of the people and getting a chance to meet David, to me would allow, I think, everybody to take what they are doing and put it on steroids. Not only their thought process, their business, their family culture. And I am just become such a proponent of what you're doing in a Tiger 21. But having said that, I also see as of this taping, there's a couple of banks that have gone under. We are likely heading into a recession, either a deep one or a mild one. Many think we're already in there. But for entrepreneurial people, it's getting harder and harder to get financing. And I know about 3 or 4 years ago, 5 years ago, you founded a company, Meadeco, which has really helped entrepreneurs get financing. Tell people a little bit about that, because I think there's a great deal of interest in that.
Okay, well, let me just go back to something you said about Tiger 21 before I address that question. And yeah, I think you're absolutely right. I think, regardless of the, kind of upcoming, whether we do go into a recession, I mean, I hope we don't have a default over the debt ceiling and those sorts of things. But I have been, I think I told you off camera, is I didn't know what I was looking for, but I found it in Tiger 21. And I think that that's true of a lot of the members. So there's about 1,250 members nationwide at current. It's growing now internationally across these 100 groups. And it does afford a person the luxury to have an ability to speak about issues, to solve problems, and to get the perspective of folks. I mean, one of the other things that you talked about earlier, your question about heroes, is like, I think, and this is probably true in your job as well, is like, I am truly inspired in the Tiger 21 sphere of just, pretty much everyone in my two groups, and I think system wide, is an entrepreneur who started with nothing and, found a way in this world to really succeed and really achieve the American dream as relates to, at least, their bank accounts. And so the minimum net worth is $20 million in investable assets, but the average across the system is about 120 million, and that sounds like a daunting amount of money, and it is. But you're really in the group setting. You're really surrounded by folks who are humble, earnest, hardworking, smart, disciplined, and it's so one of the inspirations for me, and one of the reasons I love being around it, is because of that thread of entrepreneurism that runs through, or entrepreneurship that runs through every one of our members. But thanks for bringing that up. I would say in terms of the finance world, yeah, I think we are, going back to the recession. I think with what we've seen, certainly in the last 2 months, with regard to a meltdown of some of these smaller banks, that capital is becoming much more difficult to come by, certainly from a debt perspective. We've had a series of rate increases, so that the Fed rate is significantly higher than it was a year or two ago, and you almost have a perfect storm of why banks will say no. And one of the it's kind of a joke or tagline that I've been using lately is banks will give you money just exactly when you don't need it. So you're seeing these underwriting standards become so impossible that more and more folks are forced into the world I live in, which is the venture debt world. So whether you're talking about cannabis, which by definition, because it's federally illegal and you can't bank, to early stage companies that are still burning through capital and haven't quite gotten to the point of profitability or break even, that's a much harder credit. So one of the things, the terminology I use is it's called storied credits, and there's a story why you can't get credit at the bank. And my goal within Meadeco is to work with these entrepreneurs across a number of different industries, to get them, in effect, a bridge from their hopes and aspirations to grow a business to a point where they can walk into the bank and the bank would say, oh, now that you're at profitability and now that your sales are X million or Y million, now I will deal with you and make you a loan. So really, that's the service that, for the most part, I'm an Illinois loan broker and an Illinois business broker, that I'm providing to help people. But going back to the point you made before about connectivity and my network, I'm hopefully not only bringing them access to capital, but advisory services just through my own experience, whether as a lawyer, as an entrepreneur, as a CEO of a venture-backed startup, those sorts of things. And then my network. Hey, could you use someone in Africa? Hey, can you use someone who does, sales, marketing, accounting, legal, et cetera, that hopefully I'm offering a resource-rich environment to folks who come to me for money, but then find that I can provide other services that surround the money.
Well, that's I think that's powerful, and I think that there are an awful lot of companies that think they're going to be using a traditional bank right now, or that's their plan, and they are going to be in for a rude awakening. Here in the coming months, I'm already starting to see people that are getting some outright no's, or something that should have been done in 30 or 60 days is now 125 or 140 days out, and they're still waiting for an answer. And every day it looks a little bit more grim. Um,
Yeah, and to that point, before you ask that question, I mean, that's one of the reasons why venture debt. I mean, I've got some lenders in certain instances that can make a decision and fund inside of a week or two, where when you start dealing with the larger financial institutions, there's so many checks and balances, which is fine, and underwriting is underwriting, but it goes through so many steps, it takes so long, that folks who need money today, one of the things that I talk about, there's a scenario, and you cussed first on this podcast, so I feel I can do it as well. I mean, I talked with someone just this morning who's got a nice little business. It's a minority business on the East Coast, healthy food product. And they white label this particular product, and they typically get an order for white label of 1 container full. And yesterday or last week, they got one for 8 containers full. So without access to capital and without a big bank account, they have what I call the oh shit problem, which is, oh shit, I got this great order, but I don't have the money to do it. I work with a lot of folks who suffer from the oh shit problem, which is a good problem because you have a purchase order, but you don't have the money to make it happen. And then now the clock is ticking, because whether it's Walmart or Target or whoever it might be, on the Kroger on the other end of that purchase order, they're expecting that you're going to perform and that you have the capital to be able to do it. And in a lot of cases, when someone's overwhelmed by an order such as the one I mentioned, you really got to figure it out quickly, and friends and family don't always work. And if you don't have access to a bank line or a venture debt facility, then you're screwed.
I have 2 kids at the Kelley Business School at Indiana, and they had this project when they were entering the Kelly Business School where they gave you $10,000 and they gave you some real companies, but they dressed them up so they made it so it was hard to know who it was, fictitious, made them fictitious. And to get an A, you had to have $35,000 at the end of the semester, end of the course. Taking and you can invest it any way you wanted. But what I loved about it was with every company, once you saw the video on the company before you invested in it, they said, and remember, 95% of all private equity companies go bankrupt. And that was
I
they
think
ended
probably
every video like
happening.
that. And
Right.
so, or had, some event like that. And what was interesting about that is it's oftentimes not that the people aren't smart. They're certainly smart. It's not that their product or service isn't great. It's usually great. Is that they usually didn't execute by having somebody like you on that team to help them execute. That's probably the biggest cause of failure of these companies.
Right. And my wife and I share a bunch of different board seats, which is nice. We work not only, within Meadeco to help them from a financing perspective, but at times we'll work on an advisory basis. And you're right, it's critically important that someone have access to, I'm older, but an adult who's been through I think one of the most valuable lessons to me, and one of the things that I advise, I do a lot of mentoring. I just recently had occasion to Michael Milken came to talk to some of my Tiger 21 guys, and it was phenomenal. And he was just kind of talking about the fact that like 70% of Wall Street has never seen a rate rise. They're 35 years and younger, and everything's been cheap, free money with ridiculous valuations. And now all of a sudden we're in a very, very different world than the one that, that you and I grew up in. And one of the points that I make is I've had some twists and turns along the route along my career. And I think that staring into the abyss really changes your perspective. If everything's always been rosy and everything's always on an upward trajectory, that's nice. And, very few people actually experience that. But I've had some unbelievable twists and turns across a 40-year career. And, the ability to stare at the abyss, the ability to shake it off, to figure out how you're going to function when something radically changes makes for better business people down the line, because I think there's a more holistic approach, and everything isn't a bed of roses in business, and I think that as well.
Mm. As I've gotten to know you, you mentioned you're a mentor. I mentioned you are a professor. All of the things where you're teaching, you're a teacher. And so the couple of things when I would describe you, when I kind of think about it, I say, that people don't trust the government anymore. They don't trust the media anymore. They don't trust each other anymore. And so there are so many people out there with blasting you like a fire hose, all the products and services they have to sell. And the shift that I've seen as we've gotten to know each other is that you and your people are more educating people and bringing value to those people where they're looking for information as opposed to trying to sell them something. You sort of become the authority on that topic. And the other thing I love about teaching, I just assume, so I'm assuming this. I'd love to hear you comment on that. Is I think if you really want to um, go really deep with a subject, the best way to do that is to teach it to somebody else. And so, in essence, as successful as you've been, in many ways, I think a lot of what you're doing is you're almost a teacher and a mentor at heart.
Yeah, I've been involved with a number of. Thanks for pointing that out. I've been involved with a number of mentoring organizations. One out of New York called America Needs You, which I was on the board of, and both in New York and in Chicago, and I was the chairman in Chicago. And that was an organization that helped underprivileged first generation college students to get a 25-year-old mentor like you or me during their sophomore and junior years of college. And also involved with something like that in Chicago now, that is a national organization that helps same sort of population of kids to get internships, career bridge, etc. But yeah, I think one of the things I would say is I because of the pivots along the way of my career, I actually grew up after being a lawyer in an operational role. So I literally was the right hand to an amazing entrepreneur, And my whole thing was, if he dreamed it, I made it happen. And that meant that, I had to make the trains run on time. So I literally had to understand every job. I actually basically did every job, did manage and hired every job in a, vertically integrated, fast growing real estate development company. And I was always more of the operator and less of the entrepreneur. And then after the world ended in real estate about 12 years ago, 10, 12, 15 years ago, in 2008, 2009, I had a fundamental switch in my career to being in business development and transaction management. I've since melded all three together. But one of the things I would say, and I think that you're probably, in the same boat, is the key to success as far as my business development was that I knew what I was talking about operationally, that I could have that conversation with an owner and anticipate a legal issue or anticipate a financing issue or whatever it might have been, because I've had the perspective of being a lawyer, being a borrower, being a lender, being a landlord, being a tenant, doing all the different things along the way and bringing that, 360-degree matter of fact, like, hey, if you read that lease, you will find this. You should be aware that you will do that. And I think that, if you, one of the things I bring up in my my networking and business development class is, there's a spectrum of folks that really know what they're talking about, and I'd certainly put you in that category. And then if you go to the movie Groundhog Day, you go to Ned Ryerson, and there's Ned Ryerson is trying to sell you insurance up and down just because that's all he knows, and he's more of a pure salesman as opposed to an expert who is a thoughtful advisor. And by being a thoughtful advisor and a trusted advisor, the door to business development opens, in my opinion.
Yeah, I mean, when you're making sausage, I mean, you've made it, you've sold it, you bought it. I guess that's what I mean. When you're dealing with entrepreneurs, especially at that wealth level, the most important thing is they've got to trust you. So that probably is your differentiator in terms of giving you a leg up in terms of getting trust of those folks.
Yeah, I mean, I think the fact that I'm coming at things as, wearing simultaneously a number of hats. One is as an investor, two is as a board member advisor, three is as a mentor, and then four is just, a mature business person who's been around the block on just a range of legal and business issues in good times and bad. And I don't have all the answers, but having those multiple perspectives really builds credibility, builds trust. And then obviously you have to execute against all those things. And, you can be a lot of words, but if you don't produce for the clients, then you know what happens. But again, it's taken me a long time to grow from lawyer to operations person to business development person to, I'm not going to call myself a Renaissance person, but I know enough about enough to be able to have intelligent conversations. And if I don't, I'm one phone call away from someone who is.
One of the things I've got perspective is I've got 5 kids between 16 and 24. And I always try to encourage them to don't tell me, show me what you're going to do. Meaning just go do it, as opposed to talk about it a lot. Let's not have a press conference about what you're going to do. Just let's execute. And it's interesting when I talk to their friends and other folks, there's a group that, they have no real plan. They just want to be rich. And then there's another group of people that actually are embarrassed about wealth. And they think that there's some embarrassment that should come from the wealth that they've created. Where when you and I grew up, because we're the same age, when you and I grew up, those people that worked hard and got ahead and created and created things and jobs for people and opportunity, they were the people that were the most revered. And now we've got a segment of our population where I'd almost say entrepreneurs are under attack. What do you find out there?
I think that is fair. It's just interesting. And again, I don't want to get into a political discussion, but I just look around the room in a tiger meeting. I just had 2 tiger meetings last week with combined 18 individuals with the large net worth that I talked about. And like if you think about what they've created, just in terms of put aside the money, but just like the thousands of jobs that they've created, the immense amount of commerce, with all their different suppliers and vendors and all this other stuff that, it's not for good or for bad. I'm a big believer in capitalism. I know you are. We both benefit from capitalism and, quote unquote, the American way. And, with putting aside how much people should be taxed and, how do you work all those sorts of systems? To me, that's a different question. But just like entrepreneurs are the engine of our economy, and we are blessed to have safe borders, access to capital, good relations with, a lot of the, capitalist world. And, we are blessed to have had the opportunity, obviously wish more people had the same sorts of opportunity. And just, again, this morning, talking to a couple different startups and, some of the statistics around minority representation in venture capital and private equity and law and all these other things. And, I do think that it's becoming more of a recognized phenomenon where money is starting to, it's not pouring in, but money is coming in to support women and minority owned businesses. Like right now, I'm investing in one firm that you and I have talked about, and really the focus is there to enhance the standing and the chances of success for women in the workplace. And that's a very significant need in society. So I think as I'll call it capitalism matures, hopefully the playing field is opening up so that more people that don't look like you and me have the kind of opportunities to become Tiger members, and to have the kind of success that a lot of people that you and I spend a lot of time with. And some of those advantages hopefully can be more evenly distributed, and some of the capital can be more evenly distributed as time goes by.
I mentored one of the great experiences of my life, and this goes back probably 15 years, where I mentored 4 women that were they were CPAs and on their way to be partners in a Big Four accounting firm. 3 of them are partners there. One now was the CFO for another company. And so, one of the things we talked about was you have to have a choice. You either have to be empowered or you can be a victim. You can't be both. You have to pick one. And I always chose the empowered one, or they chose empowered. And I think that it's a combination of opportunity and a mindset that people believe they can succeed. And so I'm with having 2 daughters, I think that's something that's top of mind for me. And I believe we should be a country where everybody has the opportunity. I think not being political again, I think Martin Luther King had it right. Everybody should be judged based on the content of their character, and
Right.
and everybody should be given an opportunity to succeed. But then I think it's also up to people to then go succeed.
I agree. I mean, but I'd say one of the challenges that I'm seeing now, I can see the barriers to entry are so darn high. And as an example, I have a ongoing relationship with Northwestern and their JD MBA program, and I've had a series of mentees who are individuals who are between their first and second year at Northwestern. And my 2 most recent ones are just about to graduate. Actually, I need to send them a note to congratulate them. And they're both earnest, hardworking, probably spent 4 or 5 years in the workplace before matriculating at Northwestern. And now they're going off to, nice, very high paying jobs, but at the cost of an average, in their case, of $325,000 in debt for basically just law school and business school. And in a lot of cases, that is just not even in the realm of possibility. And, I worry about, that those sorts of inequities, because that just sort of keeps the system alive and keeps the privileged few, with access and, oh yeah, I'll send my kids to Harvard. Dad will pay for it. Versus, a lot of people who don't have, a rich father, rich mother, access to resources. And, in the absence of scholarships and a significant amount of financial aid, don't have those same sorts of opportunities. So that's a troublesome barrier to entry that is all around us.
Are entrepreneurs born or are they made? You certainly work with enough of them.
That's a great question. I think it's a bit of both. Nature nurture kind of discussion. Just thinking around and just being around Tiger. Not only several of the chairs, my position, are former members as well, and so great community from the management to the chairs to the various members, and I think that there's a willingness to take risk is really, and I'm not sure if that's a gene or that's something that's learned. I guess if I had to vote, I would say it's more of a gene. But there's a lot of people that just kind of like, hey, here's my life, and I don't want to take too much risk, and I'm not going to put it on the table, et cetera. And I think, just knowing a number of really successful entrepreneurs who have seen like really dark days. And, the thing is, like, people look at something like Tiger 21 and think that everything's a bed of roses because you have accumulated a particular amount of wealth. The fact of the matter is, just like everyone else in the other population, family members get cancer or other diseases, special needs children, challenges within business, having, either equity or debt cut off. And it's like, there's very few stories that are like, hey, I was born, I took this chance, I made $1 trillion, everything's rosy. There's so many lumps and bumps along the way. But I think, besides the risk-loving, risk-taking, and discipline genes that might be out there, there's also just a practical being able to listen, being able to craft a course, being able to have that strategic vision of where you can go or what the opportunity. So there's an opportunistic strain to it as well, and it is unique. It's just like, there's a reason why a very small percentage of the population has accumulated this much, and they've in most cases they've taken huge risks along the way that most people can't, won't, or don't.
I've been reading some books about some various entrepreneurs and concept. I love to read. I love to acquire information, and they were talking about the Jerry Seinfeld I was reading something Jerry Seinfeld wrote. It was an interview he did with Howard Stern of all people, and he was talking about that how he could never be fully present for his wife and his kids because he's always thinking about writing jokes. He's every situation, and he said he's tried his whole life and he can never be fully present because he's obsessed. And I keep wondering, if there's wealth in life, there's health, there's purpose, and there's love. Can you get all four of those? Not that one or two are out of balance and you get them out of balance. Do you think you can have it all? Or do you think Jerry Seinfeld was right? For him to be at the very top of his game, he had to be obsessed with, and he still is obsessed with writing jokes.
So two things. One is, so I've read some. I'm a big fan of Jerry Seinfeld. I guess he'd be a hero of mine as well. I've seen him in person several times, and I read a book about him or just the Thursday night, called Must See TV. You're old enough to remember all that. And there was a long chapter about how he turned down I think they did 11 seasons. They did 9 or 11 seasons. And he had just habitually sort of without an agent, just renewed. And he ultimately made hundreds of millions of dollars from this, as did Larry David. But once Larry David left, after, say, the 9th season, they sat down with him, the folks from GE, and said, like, okay, are you ready for the next year? And he said no, and they were shocked. And it went, kind of all the way up the chain to the CEO, to Jack Welch. And they're like, he was the anchor of the whole Thursday night at that point. And in effect, they offered him, on top of very good pay package, they offered him, I think something like in the neighborhood of $100 million to stay for one more year. And he looked around and he saw that he was writing, starring, producing, directing, all this other stuff without Larry David. and that his friends were getting married and having kids, and and he made the decision, which doesn't matter because he's super wealthy as it is, to turn down, and they're still astonished that he turned down $100 million so that he could start that life of not paying attention to his family. So now I think he's got more, I think, balance in his life, and I guess the wheels are always going. But one of the things, and actually I could pull a book. There's a book that one of my mentors, a guy named Harry Kramer, wrote called You're 168, which, actually he was a speaker in one of my Tiger groups. And what do you have a sense of what 168 is as a number?
Well, I know it's the number of hours in a week, right?
Very
24
good.
times 7.
Very
Yeah.
good. That's Harry's quiz question. I guess I was the only one who got it in the room. But yeah, it's 168 hours. And how are you going to make the most of those 168 hours, knowing that you have to sleep? You are going to work. You're going to have family time. You're going to have, if it's applicable, religious time. You're going to have fun time. You're going to have exercise time. And one of the disciplines that I've not inherited, but embraced since reading that book and getting Harry's missives, every week, on an email, is critically evaluating that. And I've struggled my whole life with that balance question, and I'm working hard to, as I mature and kind of get to the end of my career, to make sure that I am there, I am present, spending the time with my wife, my children, my friends, etc. I think the answer is yes, but it takes hard work. And I think certainly for entrepreneurs who are super driven and always looking around the corner for the next opportunity, especially in a service business like the one I have, that there needs to be that internal, it's like an Animal House with the angel and the devil on your shoulder. Like, I'll leave that cussing out of it, but just to regulate yourself so that you are serving all those different masters.
Yeah, I learned this question from my fiance Lisa, who's a worldwide speaker herself. But when I always talk to my younger partners, I always say to them, what are you willing to do that you're not doing now to have what you don't have? And that ultimately ultimately I think that entrepreneurs are willing to go do that, and the non-entrepreneurs are only willing to go so far. And it's not, sometimes it's for a good cause, and sometimes it's just because they don't have the ability to make it happen. And there's a variety of reasons, but I think it's a choice. David, I appreciate you. I appreciate all the time that you've I know how busy you are, so I appreciate you taking the time out of your day. And I think people learned an awful lot about this. But if people want to talk to you about Meadeco, or they want to talk to you about lecturing, or they want to talk to you about Tiger 21, how do people get a hold of you?
Well, we can. My main email address is David at Mead Connect, which is MEADE Connect.com. And people ask me what Mead is, and it's an eponymous name that stands for Marcy, Ellen, Alex, David, Ethan. So my family members. I can also be reached for Tiger purposes at david.kirshenbaum, no C, at tiger21chair.com. So those are the main ways of reaching me. And I guess my cell phone or text, 847-421-6260. And I want to thank you and your crack team. You guys have done an amazing job of both preparing, and I know you and I had a chat, and I think that this is a very wholesome conversation, and just like and I knew it would be. It's like kind of like two old friends sitting in a bar but with no drinks. And we had a really nice meeting in New York a couple of weeks back, and I'm really, really grateful that we did get introduced, and that we have a long-term series of collaborations in Tiger 21 and Meadeco with your business. I'm hoping that this is the first of not necessarily many podcasts, but many ways that we can just add value to each other. And I'm a big believer. One of the other books that I would mention that I'm a big believer in is Adam Grant, who's a professor at Wharton, wrote a book called Give and Take. And basically the punchline there is givers and I know you are. I try to be givers win. And I've, literally made a career out of helping people. And, now, sometimes there's a fee involved, but I've helped a lot of people over time with job searches, with advice, et cetera. And I think that there's definitely a positive karma that comes around.
I think it's okay to do well by doing good. Or if you're from Brooklyn, it's okay to do good by doing good. But I think yeah, I agree with you, and I'm excited about the future. I think the one thing, one of many things I think we have in common is when you want to be really good at something and work with people who want to be really good at something, you always want to be better tomorrow than you are today. It's not about chasing money, or it's not just about glory or other things. It's about how can I be a little better today than I was yesterday? And I sense that in not only the people we work with, but I sense that in each of us, and that's why it's so much fun, and that's why I think we're having so much fun working together.
And I would add there that it's also important, and I think I am very careful, both in terms of procuring a Tiger 21 group as an example, but also procuring a network of counterparties and stuff like that, where you want to spend time with people that are good people, that are, think along the same lines, act along the same lines, are giving in nature, are, I'll say, menschy in nature, who look out for other people, who look out for other, opportunities for their friends and, and folks in their network. And I think, again, I think that we're buddies in this regard, that we have a very similar outlook. And I am literally trying to surround myself by super networkers like yourself, who are successful, thoughtful, and not just thinking of yourself all the time, but thinking of how you can help others, how you can help grow others' businesses and access to capital and those sorts of things. And then ultimately it boils back to, people then need you to manage their riches. And I know you do a really good job of it. And you're where you're sitting, and a possible Tiger member for a reason. And the reason is you are who you are.
Well, thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, David Kirshenbaum.